Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. Back home now and have a bit of an update on the owner situation. Obviously, the last video I made, we were discussing the news that had come out as the Glazers had finally publicly put the club on the market for sale. Ronaldo had just left, and it was like the biggest news, the biggest thing that has happened for Manchester United in quite some time. So since then, I've been trying to gathering information from people that I hear from on the front with regards to the sale, on where things are at, on who might be interested, on Ratcliffe and INEOS, as well as plans for January and things like that. So the first thing that I can say is that from my information on this, which has been pretty good so far, right now I wouldn't expect Jim Ratcliffe to become the owner, and I'll tell you why. From my understanding, it is still true that INEOS are not going to be bidding for Manchester United. Prospective bid for Manchester United will come from Sir Jim Ratcliffe himself. And that's the information I was told some time ago that I posted earlier, that INEOS had looked at the total cost and decided it wasn't worthwhile as a business decision. And that is the challenge here. So Sir Jim Ratcliffe is interested in buying the club, and it remains to be seen whether he will get other partners involved in it, because overall, in terms of personal wealth, it is a lot for him. It's a lot, and so given that it's a lot, he's likely to be much more concerned about the price of the club, trying to get it down to a certain level, to a certain range, things like that, which makes him not a non-viable bidder, but one that, has a little bit less deep pockets to just kind of pay whatever it's going to take to get the club done, especially when they get down to the final bidders and things like that. The process overall, handled by the Rain Group, who represented Chelsea in the sale, will go much of the same way. They're going to, here's kind of the process where it stands now, and then I'll talk about some other individual interested parties. There have been, at this point in time, as far as I know, at least 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 interested parties who've put things in. And by put things in, there have been a few who've actually sent formal letters of intent. We can buy this club, showing proof of funds, the ability to afford it, things like that, while there are others who have simply marked an interest to say, we're interested in this club, should it become for sale. Now Rain Group, what they are doing is collecting from all interested parties and opening it up and saying, okay, let us know. What would you be willing to pay for this club? What are your plans for it? Give us your initial kind of proposal for the club as a whole in terms of a purchase, and show us, some basic information that you have the ability to pay for this. So they're going to be collecting, a large number of those in the short term, to kind of nail down and work out what the overall list is. Again, from my understanding, I'm just going to repeat this, whether, some people disagree with this or not. From my understanding that I hear, and there was an article that said that they're not necessarily going to sell to the richest owners, but from what I hear, the Glazers are unlikely to sell to a state-backed fund. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's unlikely. And the reason it's unlikely is because, one, they have been publicly and privately against the sale of football clubs to state-backed funds, to the state-owned clubs. They've been against it publicly and privately in discussions with other owners as well as other people. Now, of course, money talks, but when you've held the line against it, that they have, and that they have formally written about it and things like that, it becomes less likely that they're going to be willing to accept those kind of parties, especially when, and people have this wrong, there are parties who are not state-backed that have plenty of money to spend and would not be limited in their ability to buy Manchester United. So I'm still hearing that aspect of it. The other factor is that they're traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and any party from a state-backed party coming in would complicate the matter and would open things up to being much more investigated, much more looked at, which is not to say that the sale couldn't go through. The problem here isn't really the Premier League. The problem is the governments involved, the UK government as well as the US government, the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, which regulates companies that are on the New York Stock Exchange. There's just going to be a lot more looking into it if it comes from not a private entity or equity. So I've still heard that they're more likely interested in selling to an American fund or a fund in America. It doesn't necessarily mean Americans, or something in one of the normal markets that has a much more observable business and financial profile for legal reasons. And in terms of other interested parties, there is, as I understand it, a party within the U.S. that has already submitted letters of intent as well as proof of funding, has an enormous amount of money, and is not so concerned about the price. And so this is where I say there are parties involved that they're not sitting there penny pinching. They're looking at it and saying, yeah, we could afford this. What's it going to cost to get it? We're going to pay the debt off. We're going to do the things that need to be done for this club. That's not to say that in the end, they're not going to want the club to be profitable. That's not to say that in the end, they're not going to want the club to increase in value, but it should. When you look at Real Madrid, for an example, it's a leading example of what United could be with proper management. A club that is going to be worth way more than 5 or 6 billion in a purchase. A club that is going to be very self-sufficient and generate enormous funds, even with debt on the books. Real Madrid have a 30-year mortgage on their billion-dollar stadium. They're going to pay it off early because they are so profitable and self-sufficient. And that is the way that United can be run successfully without a state-backed fund. And there are investors that look at it this way, that recognize the global fan base size and the interest and the money and the success of the Premier League means in the short term investment, paying off the debt and ensuring that the club has the money to get back to the top and is run right, will allow it to self-sustain in the long run, be profitable, as well as be more valuable than the money that they put in the beginning. So there's an American group involved in that. There's interest from parties that were interested in Chelsea, some not so good, like the Ricketts, that I don't believe will happen because of the issues that stopped them last time. There's interest from groups such as the Harris and Blitzer group, who own the Philadelphia 76ers, who are also interested in Liverpool. And I believe they're one that, when you read stories about United putting themselves on the market, or the Glazers putting them on the market to try to draw some buyers away from Liverpool, I believe that's one they're looking at. It is a huge fund, has a lot of money, very interested in sport, a very intriguing option if they can draw their interest and eyes away from Liverpool, because if they buy Liverpool, it wouldn't be such a good thing. They are a fund or a group that would be able to invest a lot of money. So that's one. Then there are groups such as, there are people such as this Turkish guy who was interested in Chelsea. I don't think he got involved in the final bidding, but he was there, who is extremely wealthy, that may be interested. And then there's others involved certainly as well, from different groups, different sports owners, different people. There's no, I've also heard there is interest from perhaps a Thai consortium as well as one in Taiwan. Not in mainland China, but in Taiwan and in Thailand. So there's a lot of interested parties here, and there's a lot of potential options that aren't necessarily state-backed fund that have a lot of money as well. And I think they're more likely to go ahead. But from what I understand, it's likely that we're going to know a lot more about this in the next two weeks or so. The indications are, and this is one of the reasons, again, I repeat why I don't believe it'll be a state-backed fund, is that the Glazers want to move quickly with this now while they have time. I'm not sure that the deal will be done before the summer, but essentially they want it to be, the process to be mostly concluded and ongoing, and so do buying parties, because they do want some stability. This season could be a big season in that regard, getting Champions League, things like that. You don't want a huge cloud hanging over the head of the team the whole year. It can be concluded fast. The deal may not be finished fast, but it can be concluded in a sense that you could have, by the end of the World Cup, the selected buyers there, and then the process is just moved through to wrap it up by the year's end. And by year's end, I mean season's end. And then, so that's where that's at. In terms of January, here's where things stand. As I said in a tweet earlier, I wouldn't lose sight of Cody Gakpo. There's news today from ESPN in Netherlands, which is a very good source in the Netherlands. ESPN are very, very good there. And from Rob Dawson at ESPN that United are still interested in Gakpo, that Ten Hag has asked for Gakpo. That's what I've heard. That's what's coming out. That's still who I think United will make a move for in January. With the funds saved from Cristiano Ronaldo, it would cover the cost of installments and wages, and that means it can be done within the current budget. Taking it a step further than that, I've heard they understand the costs, fees, and price associated with it, and it's simply about where things end up in January in terms of the Glazers and where things go. I mentioned in the last video that it's not necessarily true that they may not spend. I don't think they will spend a lot of money because they don't have it. But I think they could spend on something like Gakpo with understanding among buyers. Hey, we're adding this. It's going to help for the champion, for qualification for Champions League. Even maybe perhaps get approval and discuss it with some of the shortlisted buyers as we get closer to January. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. If by mid to late December, they're talking with some of the shortlisters and making plans saying that this is what we intend to do January, make sure everybody's on board so that it doesn't affect the potential sale. But Cody Gakpo is still who I believe would be the most interesting party for Ten Hag now. One that would allow him, especially if there's new buyers, to make further purchases in the summer, but someone who can fit across the front three profile for him and who he was obviously interested in before. So that's what they're looking at now. That's the main name that I would still stick with at the moment in terms of most likely signing. Obviously, he's having a great World Cup so far for the Netherlands. The United players are impressing. Bruno Fernandes, 2 assists. Maguire and Shaw were great for England, even though the USA-England game ended in a 0-0 draw, with the USA team being quite impressive. I've talked previously about certain players I rate from the US, and I think they held their own really well. Tyler Adams did exceptionally well. I think Weston McKennie did well. Yunus Musa was impressive. And that was a very fun game to watch. As an American, I mean, even though it ended 0-0, it was exciting to see. Obviously, I got rivalry with all my British and English followers with that, but it was interesting to see the U.S. actually do quite well and hold their own, and even probably have the better chances to score. But Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire still did very well there. Marcus Rashford obviously didn't play that much. Overall, I'm quite impressed with the United players so far in the World Cup. Varane should be playing today for France, and we'll see how everybody continues to do. Obviously, Casemiro had a masterclass for Brazil. Fred and Antony featured as substitutes and did pretty well on their own, but Casemiro looking like the best defensive midfielder in the world right now again. So it's exciting times for United. As a United fan, it's exciting to see your players showing up where we want to see them show up. It's exciting that the club is on the brink of change for the first time, the biggest change, the change that's necessary. And it's exciting to see where we go from here with a very good coach in Ten Hag, who's putting in extra work with Sancho, with all these players. And there'll be games obviously in the next couple of weeks, likely featuring Sancho, Martial, some of these young guys. So very excited to see what happens with that as well. So that's what I have for today. I'll definitely keep you all updated on everything that goes on. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I will see you in the next video.